do the before audit procedures. Before we are starting with a statutory audit, நம்ம என்னென்ன ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் பண்ணணும்ன்றது வந்து ஒரு பேசிக் செட் ஆஃப் கிரைட்டீரியா இருக்கும். அந்த பேசிக் செட் ஆஃப் கிரைட்டீரியா that we will be looking at currently. First thing is, number just for an understanding perspective, let's say we are talking about planning. இந்த பிளான் பண்றதுனால என்ன பெனிஃபிட் பண்றது வந்து we all know. If we go organized with anything, we will achieve better results. It doesn't matter what. Most of us வந்து we don't have a plan. அடுத்த 6 months என்ன பண்ணணும், அடுத்த 1 year என்ன பண்ணணும், அடுத்த 1 year 6 months எதுக்கு, அடுத்த 1 monthல நான் என்ன பண்ண போறேன்ன்றது வந்து most of us do not have a plan. And believe me, if possible, try to get that plan into your lives. That will really change the way you study, the way you try to do your work, the way you approach things. அது வந்து it gives you a purpose in your life. Okay, it tells you that this is where I want to be in 6 months down the line or 1 year down the line. நான் இப்படி இருப்பேன், நான் இப்படி இருக்கணும் அன்றது வந்து ஒரு முடிவோட இருக்கிறதுக்கு வந்து you need to plan upfront. அந்த பிளானிங் இருந்தப்ப the outcome is generally of a higher quality. Okay, that is the reason these standards also suggest having a plan in place before you actually carry out the audit. So இந்த பிளானுக்கு வந்து என்னென்ன பண்ணணும், எப்படி பண்ணணும்ன்றதுக்கு வந்து they have given a specific standard for this, which is the SA 300. SA 300 ஓட heading வந்து planning and audit of financial statements. They are making it as clear as possible. They are making it as clear as possible, saying planning and audit of financial statements. Audit of financial statements basically means statutory audit. Only the statutory audit will be called as an audit of financial statements. Okay, so they are making it very clear here that this is what is we are looking at. Just a minute. Okay, so let's work with the standards. The first one, the first aspect that we need to understand about the standards is this aspect. The first few lines that we have here, let's try to understand these things. Planning is not a discrete phase of an audit. Discrete abdina chinna packet or kuti. You cannot break it down. You don't have to do a plan now and then after some years. That's not how you do a planning, is what they're trying to communicate. What they say is, ஒரு ப்ரீவியஸ் ஆடிட் முடிஞ்சது அப்படின்னா அந்த முடியற அன்னைக்கு அங்கிருந்து அடுத்த ஆடிட் ஸ்டார்ட் பண்றதுக்கு நடுவுல இல்லைன்னா அடுத்த ஆடிட் கம்ப்ளீட் பண்ற வரைக்கும் this whole time there has to be continuous planning அன்றதுதான் this standard is what is trying to tell you. This planning should not be stopped at any point of time. That is what is the work of a partner and manager in any organization. Number one, as an article student, we will just do what they suggest. In the audit pono, on the audit pono, ipdi pono, anga pono, idella vandu that is our thing, look out. But from their perspective, avanga enna பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா they will do this analysis in the background. Or audit முடிஞ்சிட்டு இருக்கு. Okay, from here till the completion of the next audit. This whole time you need to plan. Enna pannom, eppadi pannom. The whole thing needs to be figured out. Adukku dhaan they say planning is not a discrete phase. Discrete andrathu vandu it's a break up andrathu. That is called discrete or small scale la pandrathu. But here it's a continual and iterative process. It keeps happening as soon as the previous quarter audit mudinjudha, then it's not a stop from there. You need to plan for the next one right from now. From the moment from the moment the previous audit is complete till the moment the next audit order report kudukara varaikum, the planning has to be on. Now there are certain things that we need to consider when we are doing the planning. And the planning on the what are the basic things that you need to consider, Abdina? These are the things that the standard suggests. If you see here, for example, planning includes the need to consider prior to the auditor's identification and assessments of the risks of material misstatement. In the statement pathingla, it looks a little technical, isn't it? This is what keywords look like: identification and assessments of the risks of material misstatement. Risk of material misstatement அன்றது வந்து எல்லாமே 315, 320, 330. This is where these words are described. So when we come to that standard, I will help you understand what is a risk of material misstatement. So before that, they are telling you that planning has to happen even before that. Before you even understand the entity, there has to be a planning as to how you want to understand the entity, because when you're trying to take up any audit, you might already have some prior experience. On the prior experience which or a certain set of things that you can decide upon. So what are those general things that you can decide upon, Abdina? This is what they are saying. First is analytical procedures to be applied as risk assessment procedures. First of all, what is risk assessment? When we are carrying out a statutory audit, assets on the balance sheet, the items of the financial statement abdina, ஒரு line item that is forming part of the financial statements, whether it is balance sheet, whether it is profit and loss, whether it is cash flow, whether it is notes, whether it is the director's report, complete report, அதுல வர information வந்து we need to have a confidence that there is true and fair view to it. The numbers are appropriate அன்றது வந்து நம்மளுக்கு ஒரு கான்ஃபிடன்ஸ் வரணும். அந்த கான்ஃபிடன்ஸ்க்கு வரதுக்கு தான் for everything there is a risk that is associated. ஒரு asset value எடுத்துக்கோங்க. Asset value எடுத்தா whether it is actual value of the asset. Just take this recent example வந்து ஒரு Sri Pipes and Electro Casting அன்றது வந்து ரெண்டு கம்பெனி இருக்கு. They have merged very recent, last January 19th or 15th, somewhere there was a amalgamation. ஸோ அதுக்கு முன்னாடி ஒரு பெரிய கேஸ் நடந்துட்டு இருக்கு. ஒரு 1 year அந்த கேஸ் நடந்துச்சு. வாட் ஹாஸ் ஹேப்பன்ட் இஸ், எலக்ட்ரோ காஸ்டிங் லிமிடெடோட பேலன்ஸ் ஷீட்ல வந்து ஒரு 2000 crores அசெட் ஒன்னு இருக்கு. ஓகே, now the very interesting part is statutory auditor has been giving the statutory audit report கொடுத்துட்டே இருந்தாங்க. But when the merger and amalgamation started, the buy side, sell side. Buy side is electro castings and sell side is the Sri Pipes, Sri Kalahasti Pipes. This company was selling their business to electro castings. So sell side company வந்து ஒரு due diligence பண்ணாங்க, whether the company is actually good to join or whether it is feasible, whether we'll get the money. இதெல்லாம் வந்து ஒரு basic analysis பண்ணுவாங்க. Buy side, sell side ரெண்டு auditors வந்து they will audit each other's financial statements. This is what you do in consulting assignments. This does not come as statutory audit. This does not come as internal audit. It comes in the consulting assignment, buy side, sell side audits. So இது வந்து பண்றப்ப what the sell side, that is Srikalahasti Pipes ஓட auditors என்ன ஐடென்டிஃபை பண்ணாங்கன்னா, they identified that there is almost 7,000 crore asset bookல இருக்கு. Okay, out of that 2,000 crores is actually nothing. Out of 7,000 crores, 2,000 crores is actually nothing. And the warehouse it was taken on lease. They have done a lot of asset work on that. Everything is there. But on the lease முடிஞ்சு போச்சு. The owner has taken back that whole land. The factory எல்லாமே it has gone back to the owner. There is not a single penny, anything that can be related to that land with these people. So just imagine, when you are looking at a 7,000 crore asset base, and out of that 2,000 crores is absolutely nothing. Okay, it is just an entry on the balance sheet. Just imagine how significant impact it can have. And this is what is a risk assessment. For every single number that is forming part of the financial statements, there is a risk associated with it. Now, with respect to assets, it could be the physical existence of it, it could be the ownership of it. Lease lease ownership is a big risk, isn't it? Whether that ownership is with us or with the owner itself, whether it is with the tenant or with the owner. When you take a physical presence அப்படின்னா, physical existence அப்படின்னா, whether that asset is actually existing or not. Intangible asset irundal, whether that is the actual value of it or not. What is the real value of that intangible asset? These are certain things that we need to really get into when we are doing the statutory audit. So this is what gives us the confidence that this asset value is appropriate. ஒரு அசெட் எடிஷன் நடந்திருக்கு அப்படின்னா அதுக்கு ஒரு ப்ராப்பரான இன்வாய்ஸ் இருக்கணும், இல்லைன்னா ஒரு அக்ரிமெண்ட் இருக்கணும். we will check that. ஒரு அசெட் டெலீட் ஆயிடுச்சு, இல்ல டிஸ்போஸ் ஆயிடுச்சு, இல்ல புக்ஸ்ல இருந்து எடுத்துட்டாங்க அப்படின்னா, வாட் இஸ் த பேக்கிங், மேனேஜ்மெண்டோட அப்ரூவல் இருக்கா, இதெல்லாமே நம்ம செக் பண்ணுவோம். ஸோ தி ஆடிட் டாக்குமெண்டேஷன், சம்திங் தட் இஸ் பிஹைண்ட் திஸ், a process and procedure, or some confirmation from the inside the organization or external to the organization that this particular event or activity has happened under the number documentation. In the documentation is what helps the statutory auditor get a confidence that yes, this is there. Okay, so in the documentation, this number confirmation, இதெல்லாமே பண்றதுதான் ஒரு risk, is called as risk assessment. Every number that they are looking at in the financial statements has some or the other risk associated with that. How much of risk keeps deviating or keeps changes with the nature of the item that you're looking at. Now, இப்போ asset it is a significant matter for any organization, and when you're looking at a risk of 2,000 crores out of 7,000 crores, it is a very big number, isn't it? Calculate பண்ணுங்க, what is the percentage? 2/7 பண்ணா it's almost 30%, 28.57%. Almost 30% of the asset base is actually nothing. It's just an entry on the balance sheet. So just imagine how significantly your ratios will change, how significantly the outlook of the company changes. Everything will change from that point, isn't it? So that is what is risk assessment. Or let's take another example. Let's take something called as investments. Now, during COVID time, many of the companies that have invested have seen that the market value of their investments has gone into negative. Okay. Now, when you are doing this valuation on the balance sheet, you need to show that there is an actual loss. There is the present value of that investment is actually a loss. You need to show it on the books. You need to capture it in the profit and loss. You need to capture it on the balance sheet. It's a risk for you as well as them. You, because you are signing the balance sheet. Them, because the future மேல வரல அப்படின்னா it is a big risk, isn't it? Next, coming to cash items. cashல வந்து whether physically that cash is there or not, whether they're exceeding the income tax limits when it comes to cash payments and all. இது எல்லாமே வந்து there is a specific type of risk with respect to the cash items. Sales யோசிக்கோங்க. I think I have given this example in FM when we are studying. In the sales ஓடுது வந்து, let's say there was one particular company where they were reporting sales, but next month first weekல வந்து they will reverse significant amount of sales. Same thing they will do at the end of the month. End of the month they'll keep booking sales, okay, or they will just get some sales orders market and they will do some official documentation, they will just get some sales orders, அது வந்து சேலா புக் பண்ணிடுவாங்க. பட் கம் த நெக்ஸ்ட் மந்த் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வீக் வந்த உடனே எல்லாமே ரிவர்ஸ் ஆயிடும், பிகாஸ் தேர் இஸ் நோ ஆக்சுவல் சேல் that is happening. All these people, they just take the money as bonus and they'll leave, but there is no sale that is actually happening behind the whole book. Okay, so there is a risk that is associated with the sales, whether there is actual sales happening or not. So each and every single item of balance sheet, of profit and loss, of cash flow, or basically the whole financial statements, has a risk associated with them. And what auditor has to do is confirm, or not confirmation, give a true and fair view that these numbers forming part of the financial statements are appropriate. So அந்த ஆடிட்டருக்கு வந்து ஒரு சாட்டிஸ்பாக்சன் வரணும், கி இது வந்து ஒரு கரெக்டான நம்பர் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு சாட்டிஸ்பாக்சன் வரணும். அந்த சாட்டிஸ்பாக்சன் வர்றதுக்கு தான் பண்ண போற ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் வந்து we call them as analytical procedures. அது வந்து ரெண்டு விதமான ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் இருக்கு. We will come to that in subsequent standards. One is called as substantive analytical procedures or substantive audit procedures. இன்னொன்னு வந்து analytical procedures. Substantive audit procedures or substantive analytical procedures என்றது வந்து they are keywords only. அது வந்து what it means is that when you are carrying out an audit, what are the practical steps that you need to take? What are the practical steps that you need to look into? You need to take the documentation for the process. அது ஒரு அக்ரிமெண்டா இருக்கலாம், ஒரு இன்வாய்ஸா இருக்கலாம், இல்ல ஒரு ரிப்போர்ட் இருக்கலாம். Whatever is the basis for that accounting entry, that becomes verifying, that becomes a substantive audit procedure. You are establishing the fact that this item has this accounting value or this book value or this fair value. இந்த அக்கவுண்டிங் என்ட்ரிக்கு வந்து ஒரு பேசிஸ், ஒரு பின்னாடி ஒரு டாக்குமெண்டேஷன் ஆடிட் பண்றது becomes your substantive audit procedure. Not just this, ஒரு பேசிக்கான எக்ஸாம்பிள் தரேன். So auditing the documentation is one of the substantive audit procedures. Next, think of it from other perspective. FM, financial ratios. Before and after the audit, you do some FM analysis and the ratio analysis பண்ணுவாங்க. Ratio analysis பண்ணப்ப sometimes you may find some significant deviations. And at least from what I know is that the Big Four definitely give a deviation analysis. And the deviation analysis என்ன அப்படின்னா, previous year balance sheet எடுத்து current year balance sheet எடுத்து they will do one comparison, line to line item, line item to line item, they will do one comparison. Wherever there is a 5% and above deviation, whether increase or decrease, it could be a 5% increase or it could be a 5% decrease from the previous year. அந்த இடத்துல வந்து they ask the employees, they ask the management to give a written response against it. ஏன் இவ்வளோ deviation? If there is a sale more than 5% deviation அப்படின்னா why there is a deviation? If there is an increase, why there is an increase? If there is a decrease, why there is a decrease? சும்மா அப்படியே அந்த சேல் வந்து இன்க்ரீஸ் ஆயிடக்கூடாது இல்ல. there should be some logical reason. நாங்க வந்து ஒரு புது ப்ராடக்ட் லான்ச் பண்ணோம், நாங்க ஒரு புது மார்க்கெட் என்டர் பண்ணிருக்கோம், இல்ல ஒரு ப்ராடக்ட் வந்து சக்சஸா போயிட்டு இருக்கு, நாங்க வந்து ஒரு டிஸ்கவுண்ட் இது நடந்து அதுக்கப்புறமா we have seen this increase, or some logical establishment should be there behind that 5% increase, because it is a significant number எப்பவுமே. Okay, similarly ஒரு asset வந்து why there is a more than 5% deviation. It could be decrease by 5% or increase by 5%. ஆமா, அங்க சேல்ஸ் இன்க்ரீஸ் ஆகிறதுக்கு வந்து we have bought in some assets, we have purchased one new company, we have deployed more assets into the business so that we will see a significant increase in sale. ஒரு புது மெஷினரி பர்ச்சேஸ் பண்ணோம், so you can see this corresponding increase in the sale also அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அவங்க ஒரு ரிப்ளை கொடுப்பாங்க. This is basically your analytical procedure, substantive audit procedure and then analytical procedure. Audit procedure வந்து ரெகுலரா நம்ம கால்குலேட் பண்ணி பாக்குறது 5% அப்படின்னா ஆக்சுவலி 5% தான் இருக்கா இல்லையா, டாக்குமெண்டேஷன் இருந்தா அந்த டாக்குமெண்டேஷன் பாக்குறது, இது எல்லாமே ரெகுலர் சப்ஸ்டாண்டிவ் ஆடிட் ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ். And then comes the analytical procedures, which are like ratio analysis, or you try to establish the fact that this value is true with respect to another source. External documentation, external confirmation வாங்குறது, இல்லைன்னா 26AS பார்க்கறது. 26AS ல வந்து advance tax கட்டினா we know from the 26AS whether that advance tax is reflecting there or not. So similarly, there is some external party which is confirming that this is the actual balance. Supplier oda statements எடுத்து பார்க்கிறது, supplier வந்து balance confirmation வாங்குறது. All these things are basically your substantive audit procedures. Along with that, there are some analytical procedures like ratio analysis. Okay, so these things you need to plan upfront அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க in the SA 300ல. What they are trying to establish here is that not just what audit you are going to carry out, what type of audit you are going to carry out, what kind of procedures you are going to apply. Along with the substantive audit procedures, you also need to decide on what analytical procedures you need to apply. அந்த analytical procedures தான் ஒரு எக்ஸாம்பிள் நான் கொடுத்தது வந்து take this what is that, and the 5% deviation that is generally done by the Big Four. And the 5% deviation under the one, just take the last year financial statements, this year financial statements, just compare the values pie to pie, assets, cash, inventory, and the heads up day compare panni, you need to see how much deviation is there. அதுக்கு வந்து significant deviation இருந்தா either it is a warning sign for you or a warning sign for them. Okay, and the warning sign for you abdina you need to further dig into. That is also called as analytical procedures. So these things are what they are trying to say. Be prepared that these are the analytical procedures that you need to carry out for this particular organization that you are going to audit. This is what is the first point, meaning the analytical procedures to be applied as risk assessment procedures. Risk assessment, the risk that is there behind every number confirmation and the number true or fair andradhukku vandu you need to carry out some audit procedures, either checking the documentation or doing the analytical procedures, or second level of review or background check. அக்கௌண்டிங் என்ட்ரி சேஸ் டெப்ரிசியேஷன் வந்து இவ்வளவு அமௌண்ட் சார்ஜ் பண்ணாங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு அக்கௌண்டிங் என்ட்ரி வரும், டெப்ரிசியேஷன் டு அக்யூமுலேட்டட் டெப்ரிசியேஷன். பட் ஓவராலா வந்து இந்த அசெட் கேட்டகரிக்கு வந்து 20% டெப்ரிசியேஷன். ஓகே, திஸ் இஸ் த ஓப்பனிங் வேல்யூ, ஒரு 20% போட்டா திஸ் மஸ்ட் பி த க்ளோசிங் வேல்யூ அப்படின்னு நம்ம ஒரு ஜென்ரல் அனாலிசிஸ் பண்ணலாம். அந்த ஜென்ரல் அனாலிசிஸ் பண்ணிட்டு அந்த வேல்யூ வந்து அங்க பார்த்தா if there is a significant difference. This has actually happened in one of the audits that I went for. Let's say 100 is the opening value, 20% asset on the depreciation on the specific category of assets on the 20% depreciation. It should be 80, right? But the books is showing somewhere around 75. இதனால 75 காமிச்சிட்டு இருக்கு அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு then we went deeper inside it and then dug out and then realized there is a disposal which has been accounted as a depreciation. So இந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் இருக்கும். So that is the reason you need to do a overall analysis as well. That is what is called as the analytical procedures. Along with the regular audit procedures, there are certain things that help you go along, understand, get a confirmation, get a satisfaction that these numbers and audit that you're doing is appropriate, is true and fair. அதுக்கு பண்ற procedures எல்லாமே analytical procedures. So along with when you're doing this planning, not just carrying out the audit, you need to parallelly plan as to how to get parallel confirmation of those numbers. That is the first point. Second point, obtaining a general understanding of the legal and regulatory framework applicable to the entity. If you are talking about a factory, believe me, there are close to 40 laws and regulations that are applicable. If you're auditing a company, IT company, not just income tax act, not just companies act, not just SEBI regulations, everything, there is also another IT act which is also applicable for them. Okay, similarly, if you're talking about something like let's say a banking company, there is a banking act which is in addition to the regular companies act, income tax act, SEBI act, RBI act அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு இதெல்லாம் ரெகுலரா தான் இருக்கு. On top of this, there is a banking act, isn't it? So depending upon the company that you're auditing, the legal requirements, the legal framework keeps changing. And then on top of that, there might be specific state laws which you need to consider. So this, they say, when you are doing the planning, ensure that you are training the people, you are ensuring that these aspects, these laws and regulations are also covered in addition to the regular things that we generally consider. Income tax, GST and Companies Act, எப்படியாவது by default we are considering these days, isn't it? But in addition to this, there is always some or the other law which is applicable for that particular industry. So we may, as a statutory auditor, we may need to ensure there are certain compliances with respect to that as well. இப்போ for suppose பெரிய கம்பெனி இருந்தா ESI, EPF returns file பண்றது, the fines, the filing, everything is coming from ESI, EPF Act. So there are multiple laws and regulations. ஒரு ஃபேக்டரி எடுத்தா ஃபேக்டரிக்கு வந்து மினிமம் வேஜஸ் ஆக்ட், காம்பன்சேஷன் ஆக்ட், ஃபேக்டரியில வந்து சேஃப்டி அண்ட் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட்ஸ் ஆக்ட், இந்த மாதிரி there are 40 different acts that are applicable for a factory in general. That is if the number of workers is less than 500. More than 500 irunda, another 2 acts come into the picture. So this is something which is very significant when you are doing any audit. If you are not aware what legal laws are applicable, then you are the one in the soup, because it becomes a risk whether you are auditing properly is what comes, and the question mark comes. So that is why they are saying, the big daddy, the ICA is telling you, boss, please be prepared. You are trying to plan for the audit. Be prepared. This is what is the parallel procedures that you need to think of. This is the legal structure that you are looking at. And this is what you need to ensure there is compliance with. Third one, the determination of materiality. Materiality andrathu vandu is a keyword again. Materiality is, okay, let's take this example. When you are riding a bike, unga pinnadi unga parents will sit, okay? When you are driving at 40 kilometers per hour or 60 kilometers per hour, they will say, there are some most parents என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க, slow down, கொஞ்சம் மெதுவா போ அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. Because their risk perception is different. Their 60 is different. Their 40 is different from you, isn't it? நீங்க போற 40 அவங்களுக்கு வந்து பயமா இருக்கலாம், isn't it? நீங்க போற 60 அவங்களுக்கு பயமா இருக்கலாம். நீங்க போற 20 எடுத்துக்கோங்க, பட் ஸ்ட்ரெயிட்டா அந்த பைக் ஓடலன்னா அவங்களுக்கு அது ரிஸ்கியா தான் இருக்கும், isn't it? From their perspective, anyone who is not riding the bike, or anyone who is not driving the bike, or anyone who is not driving that vehicle, பக்கத்துல இருக்கிறவங்களுக்கு எப்பவுமே டென்ஷனா தான் இருக்கும். இது எங்க போயிட்டு இருக்கு, எப்படி போயிட்டு இருக்குன்ற ஒரு டென்ஷனா தான் இருக்கும். whenever there is a second person, the perspective always changes. The risk perception always changes. What is material? What is risky? It is always subject to change. It is always subject to perception. From one person to another person, it will always deviate. Adanala, the statutory auditor who is doing the audit needs to establish a materiality level for the organization that they are trying to audit. What is this materiality level? One of the organization that I'm currently auditing, they have a policy in place which says any capital expenditure, shipbuilding ship maintenance. So basically in the international waters ships போகும் இல்லைங்களா, அந்த ஷிப்புக்கு they will be taking that ship and leasing it out. Yeah, if let's say Lenovo இருக்கு, Lenovo laptops அனுப்பணும் from China la manufacture ஆயிட்டு they have to come to India. So from China to India there must be shipping done, right? So on the shipping you need to hire some. Lenovo is a IT company, they cannot have their own ships, practically not feasible for them. So they will simply hire a ship. They will say, boss, this is the load that we need to deliver, we will do the packing, everything, you just need to take it and deliver. So they will hire someone. So on the hire பண்ணும்போது these shipping companies come into the picture. So now what happens is, sometimes on the ship maintain பண்றதுக்கு repair பண்றதுக்கு they sometimes incur a very significant amount. ஒரு சின்ன repair பண்ணாலும் it will go into lakhs sometimes. ஏன்னா anything with respect to ship engine or anything with respect to the ship maintenance requirements, அதெல்லாமே எப்பவுமே காஸ்ட்லியா தான் இருக்கும். That is the nature of the ship. ஏன்னா அது it corrodes very fast. Sea water is something that is very damaging for the ships, isn't it? Sea water is what is basically generating the revenue, but at the same time it damages the ship from the inside. நம்ம ஆக்சிஜன் பிரீத் பண்ற மாதிரி தான். Oxygen is what is helping us survive, but oxygen is the very element that is making us age. We are aging because of oxygen, we are surviving because of oxygen. So இப்போ எது விடுறது? Do we stop aging or do we stop breathing? அதே மாதிரி தான் sea water is also like that for the ships. So in the situations it is technically like repairs and maintenance only. It is generally you're trying to protect the engine, you're trying to bring it back into one shape. But sometimes the expense is so significant that you need to capitalize it. So this is where the materiality concept comes into place. Let's say they say anything above 1 lakh repair or anything above 50,000 repair we will capitalize. This is what is called as materiality. நான் ஒரு very high level definition கொடுத்திருக்கேன். Let's take it to a smaller notch. Petty cash எடுத்துக்கோங்க. Petty cashல the income tax act itself is telling you you should not carry out certain transactions above 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. இதுக்கு மேல நீங்க கேஷ் கொடுக்க கூடாதுன்றது அவங்களே சொல்றாங்க, இன்கம் டாக்ஸ்லயே சொல்றாங்க. ஓகே, so that means that there is a threshold beyond which you cannot use petty cash. So if there is any expense that is coming out of petty cash for more than this amount, you need to be careful. You need to say that, okay, boss, materiality statement basically is for this particular organization, this is the value that I am looking at. Let's say 10,000, let's say 5,000. Why are their expenses more than 5,000? Why is a single transaction more than 5,000? Are there approvals? Are there any documentation for this? This is what you need to check with respect to that. That is what is the materiality concept. Okay, so let's talk about some other item of the balance sheet. Let's talk about the equity, let's talk about the assets. How much is material when it comes to large scale numbers like assets or equity? How much is a significant number under the ஒரு question, and it always changes perception from one statutory auditor to another statutory auditor. The perception continuously changes. அதனாலதான் when you're doing this planning, this definition of materiality is important. Let's say for higher level number of assets, you say, okay, 5% of the sales is a materiality level, 10% of the assets is a materiality level. So the materiality level under the one, it may change based on the nature of item that you are reviewing, or you can have a standard level. Let's say, okay, this is somewhere we are talking about L&T. Their balance sheet runs into thousands of crores. And believe me, there was literally an instance where in L&T audit, there was some transaction that was close to 60, 70 lakhs. There was a 60, 70 lakh difference. And then they were like, this is not very significantly material for us. Look at our sales, which is 4,000 crores, 40,000 crores, 1% of it, 0.1% of it. This is nothing for us. This was the literal reply for from the management. Okay. And for us, looking from article perspective, looking from an individual perspective, you see it, that number 40 lakhs, 60 lakhs, it's a very significant amount. But we need to at the same time understand that for a company that is earning in 4,000 crores, 40,000 crores, this money is nothing. It's peanuts for them, isn't it? So that is what is materiality. We need to establish what is significant for this person. What becomes that significant number for this particular organization. General guidance வந்து 5% of the sales, 10% of the asset, 10,000 rupees. இதெல்லாமே வந்து ஒரு ஜென்ரலா இண்டஸ்ட்ரியில யூஸ் பண்ற டெர்மினாலஜி. But as a statutory auditor, you have the right to decide what is material for these people. So this is what is materiality. So this is required because unless you establish a materiality level to that organization, be able to figure out how to carry out with respect to some items of the balance sheet or financial statements. Next, involvement of experts. Like I said, SA 600 series vandu, it talks about involving or using the help of someone else. Let's say there is a legal requirement, there is something, a big case that is going on. Most of the times, the entity that we are auditing, we will know upfront what issues they are facing or what things that are happening in that organization. So with respect to this, just a minute. So if we take this particular situation with respect to this, the requirement of involving another person who is a market expert. It could be an engineer, it could be a lawyer, it could be a company secretary, it could be another chartered accountant, it could be anyone, okay, with a professional degree in their hand. அவங்களோட ஒர்க் நம்ம அனாலிசிஸ் பண்ணி யூஸ் பண்ணோம் அப்படின்னா actuaries also we do a lot of verification in our statutory audits. Actuaries எப்படின்னா, let's say insurance இருக்கு. Insurance வந்து gratuity and superannuationக்கு வந்து, you know that so many employees are retiring in the next 5 years, 10 years. And அவங்களுக்கு வந்து you need to pay, sometimes you need to pay around 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 80 lakhs, 100 lakhs. ஒரே வாட்டி இந்த அமௌண்ட் வந்து you ask them to suddenly you tell the management, sir, he is retiring tomorrow, we need to pay 100 lakhs அப்படின்னா management will also be shocked, isn't it? 100 lakhs they need to bring from somewhere, right? Suddenly on the cash flow, operations should not be affected. அதனால they do something called a superannuation account on LIC கிட்ட ஓபன் பண்ணுவாங்க. What they do is, okay, you need 100 lakhs at the end of 10 years. So from today, if you are investing at the rate of 10%, உங்களுக்கு வந்து ஒரு 10% return வந்திருக்கு அப்படின்னா, you don't have to save 100 lakhs. You need to save maybe somewhere say 60 lakhs. 60 lakhs மேல 10%, 10%, 10% அப்படியே compound ஆயிட்டு you will get somewhere around close to 100 lakhs by the end of 10 years, isn't it? So this is something that is done on a large scale companies by almost all the major listed entities. All listed entities will do this for by default, whether private or public. அவங்க என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா they hire actuaries. Actuariesன்றது வந்து ஒரு profession. அதுவும் they are also called as CA only, certified actuaries. அந்த actuaries வந்து chartered actuaries. Chartered actuaries, they are also called as CAs, but what they do is they are like the highest of logical analysis. Ipo most of the first ranking chartered accountants, they also try to do certified actuaries, because it is very highly into mathematical concepts, high level mathematical analysis ellame irukum. So these people are the ones who actually determine how much premium to be. ஒரு நம்ம ஒரு இன்சூரன்ஸ் பாலிசி வாங்குறோம் அப்படின்னா அதுல ஒரு பிரீமியம் அமௌண்ட் வருது இல்லைங்களா, அந்த பிரீமியம் அமௌண்ட் வந்து இட் இஸ் பீங் டிட்டர்மைன்ட் பை அ ஆக்சுவரி. So this is one of the very common example of how actuaries work, but there are other applications also. So this person will come and say, okay, based on the age factors, based on the return expected, based on the life expectancy, based on the number of employees, based on their salaries, based on the growth rate of the salaries, so many factors they will consider, and they say this was the balance of superannuation and gratuity account last year, this much you have to invest this year, and this is what is the expected value அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஒரு report they will give. Based on that, these people will make the investment. So that document of the actuaries is actually becoming your audit support, isn't it? When you're trying to establish why this payment has been made, that is the document, and the actuaries கொடுத்த report தான் நம்மளுக்கு document. Or let's say or internal auditor, IFC, internal financial controls pati statutory auditor needs to report. He is taking the support of the internal audit report that was carried out. So internal auditor has actually done all the work and he is using that report. So he has to give due credit to them, due respect to them, everything. So when you're trying to involve the other experts, you need to plan it upfront, is what this standard says. Next and the last point, the performance of other risk assessment procedures. Like I said, risk assessment procedures are basically what you carry out to establish that this value that is coming to the balance sheet, the financial statements, is true and fair. Now, with respect to that, we carry out substantive audit procedures, analytical procedures, and if required, we may have to carry out other procedures also. What is this performance of other risk assessment procedures under the one, when the correct appropriate standard comes, we will discuss it over there. Okay, so these are the basic things they say that you need to do before you plan. These are the first things that you need to jot down. These are the things that you need to have in place before you start the actual planning process itself அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. Now, in addition to this, once you have these things in place, there are two other things that they are asking you to ensure. One is SA 220 வந்து client relationship last year எப்படி இருந்துச்சு, what is the situation that you have faced, if there were any legal troubles, will this happen subsequently also, will there be any significant issues that were identified. Let's say there was a law change one or 2 years ago, there was a change with respect to the liability on the statutory auditors. Immediately what has happened is almost 40-50 companies in that particular industry, the statutory auditors gave a letter to the ministry, the MCA, saying that we will not continue as statutory auditors for this organization because the risk is too high. So suddenly the ministry was shocked. Why so many auditors are leaving in this industry? அப்படின்னு பார்த்தா, the legal responsibility and liability on the statutory auditors is like extremely high, which is not practical in line with the activities carried out in that industry. So they say the industry is not bothered with these compliances. Why are you putting so much of risk on the statutory auditor? Because அதுல வந்து ஏதாவது மாட்டினா direct jail தான். Okay, 10 years, 20 years jail தான். The industry itself is not bothered. Why are you putting so much risk onto us? So this is certain things that you need to establish. So this is also discussed in SA 220. Previous relationship, you need to check. You need to check whether the client has, whether on the client and the specific audit engagement on the, is it going as per the required standards, the quality standards, the legal standards, everything, and see whether you would like to continue with that engagement or not. Okay. It also includes the integrity and the management. Correct, are they doing any fraud? If you are you sensing anything that but you are not able to point out something, இதெல்லாமே இருந்தா safe to come out of it, because there is a significant risk to your own profession. Next, second thing, communicating with the predecessor auditor where there has been a change of auditors in compliance with the relevant ethical requirements. This is one thing that is compulsory for any statutory auditor. When a statutory auditor is taking up an audit, they need to send one official letter to the previous statutory auditor and say, sir, I am taking up this engagement. Is there any contention or any apprehensions on your behalf? அப்படின்னா அவங்க கேட்பாங்க. Sometimes they will reply with a negative saying, yes, I have an issue. I haven't received my audit fees with these people yet. I have faced these particular issues. I have seen that the management is involving themselves in certain types of fraud அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அவங்க proof தரணும். So this becomes the basis for this guy to decide whether the audit engagement has to be carried out or not. If the previous auditor has not been paid the audit fees, the ICA itself says, do not take up that engagement because this can happen to you also. Ensure that the previous auditor is paid because they are your own profession. Respect the professional member, respect your brother, respect your sister. Try to ensure that this fees is paid, otherwise the same thing might happen to you also, அப்படின்னா. Irrespective of what differences the management and the auditor has, these things are some basic things. You have agreed to something and you need to pay for it, isn't it? So these are the things that they are ensuring, asking you to check even before you start with the planning. Do all these analysis. There were 5 points discussed before, and then they are also talking about 2 additional points that you need to consider before carrying out the planning itself. Now, once you have gone through all these phases, this is when you actually come to the planning stage. Let me share my whiteboard. Okay. So when you're doing the planning, they say there are 2 things that you need to take into consideration. Audit strategy and audit plan. What is strategy? What is plan? Strategy அன்றது வந்து, whenever you are looking at the word called strategy, அப்படின்னா, it is an overall picture that you are looking at. What are you trying to establish by doing this audit? What are you trying to achieve by getting into this? What is the overall picture that you need to look at? What is the outcome of this? Who is using these reports? This is what is the strategy, the overall perspective. The overall perspective is what is the strategy, and then comes the audit plan, which is the actual activities that you need to actual audit that you need to carry out. Actual auditல வந்து நம்ம என்னென்ன பண்ணணும்ன்றது வந்து you need to discuss there. அதுக்கு வந்து we have SA 315, SA 330. SA 315 talks about the identification and assessing of risks of material misstatement. I will discuss about this when we come to that. And SA 330 talks about responses to assess risk. இதுல வந்து 315ல வந்து நம்ம risk assessment பண்ணுவோம். 330ல வந்து அதுக்கு எப்படி respond பண்ணணும்ன்றது பார்ப்போம். So these things are actually part of the actual audit. First, identify risk and respond to that risk. That is what is the actual audit that we all do, statutory audit. Now that is the actual audit plan. And then they also talk about any other analytical procedures or audit procedures that is applicable. Okay. So this is what you actually do during the audit. One is identify risk and then respond to that risk. Respond is basically do additional audits or do additional checks, get additional documentation, get additional confirmation. All this stuff is basically your actual audit. That is what is happening in the audit plan stage. Now, audit strategy is what is first. This comes first and this comes second. Now, what do they say with respect to the audit strategy? They say first establish the scope, timing, and niche direction. So when you're talking about the audit, they say these are the three things that you need to establish. One is scope, one is timing, and the third one is direction. Let's say we are talking about the scope. What exactly is the scope, Abdina? Scope, we all know what is actually to be carried out. What is the outcome that we are looking at? Okay. Ipo statutory audit Abdina, what is the outcome? We have to give a statutory audit report. Okay. When we are doing the statutory audit report, the ultimate outcome is that this audit report is going out into the public. It is viewed by all. This is what is the report that we need to give under the வந்து நம்மளுக்கு தெரியும். That becomes your scope. So based on this, the management cannot restrict anything for you. For internal audit, they can restrict certain areas. They will say, don't do this process, don't do HR now, don't touch operations now, don't touch financials now. They can restrict you. But when it comes to statutory audit, they cannot restrict you from identifying or auditing the items of financial statement. Anything above the financial statements, items of financial statements, they can stop you. They can stop you from touching the operations, everything that is legally valid. But when it comes to the statutory audit, the very purpose is basically to give a statutory audit report. And the statutory audit report தரத்துக்கு வந்து we need to carry out certain things. And that is what establishes the overall scope of the audit. Let's simply say, for this purpose, the statutory audit becomes the general scope of any audit plan here. Next comes the timing of the audit. Timing of the audit andradhu vandu what time we need to carry out this audit abdina, whether it is at the year end, whether it is on a quarterly basis, whether it is once in a month, at which time should we actually carry out the audit andradhu vandu oru question da. So this is important because when we are talking about listed entity, every quarter there must be audited financial statements. So by default, there must be an audit every quarter. And sometimes there are the organization is so large and or the organization is so critical. The processes are in such a way that there are statutory audits which are conducted on a monthly basis also. So depending upon the client requirement, depending upon what you are trying to establish, you need to change the timing of the audit as well. And third part is the direction of the audit. Direction of the audit is basically the procedures that we are trying to conduct. What type of procedures based on the nature of the entity that we are looking at. If it is an IT company, procedures maro, or a financial organization, procedures maro, or a bank, procedures maro, or a let's say investment company, procedures maro, or a manufacturing unit, the procedures will change. So the direction helps you establish what kind of procedures, what is the outcome that we are looking at in the scope and timing based on the scope and timing, the directions needs to be established for the audit. So overall audit strategy this is what we are looking at: the nature, the scope, timing and direction of the audit. So for establishing the scope, timing and direction, for establishing the scope, timing and direction, these are the factors you need to consider. அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. Factors to consider. One, engagement characteristics. So what is expected out of us? It is basically the statutory audit. What is the engagement for? Engagement says you are being engaged for the purpose of giving a statutory audit report. So from there you get the scope. You get the, from there you can establish the timing. From there you can establish the direction that you are trying to look at for the audit. So these become the basics for you. The engagement letter, அது பார்த்தா உங்களுக்கு நம்மளுக்கு இந்த these three things we can establish out of it: the scope, timing and the direction. Then comes the reporting objectives. What is the end outcome? Give the audit report. So these are all basically helping us establish these things. One is the reporting objectives, one is the engagement characteristics, the other one is the significant factors. Significant factors to direct the engagement team. Abdina, basically engagement team is the one which is actually carrying out the audit, isn't it? The engagement team is the set of partner, manager and the article students, the paid assistants who have been allocated for this particular audit. அவங்களுக்கு what to do, what not to do is basically the direction, isn't it? Based on the engagement letter, based on what is expected out of this engagement, the scope, the timing, the direction are established. That is the overall strategy for this particular audit. So these are the, for establishing the scope, timing, direction, these are the factors that they are saying, have this in mind. This is what will help you. And then they say finally, nature, timing and extent of audit procedures. Nature, timing and extent. This again is another keyword. Nature, timing and extent, let us discuss this when we are talking SA 315. அங்க ஒரு detailed explain பண்ணலாம். But for now, have it in mind that nature, timing, and extension அப்படின்னா, when we are talking about the nature, it means, let me talk about something like bank balance. நான் வந்து டைரக்டா பார்க்கணும் அப்படின்னா, எனக்கு வந்து பேங்க் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட் கொடுப்பாங்க. ஐ கேன் ஜஸ்ட் லுக் அட் இட் அண்ட் சே ஓகே, திஸ் இஸ் த பேங்க் பேலன்ஸ் தட் மஸ்ட் பி தேர். புக்ஸ்ல இவ்வளவு இருக்கா இல்லையான்றது வந்து எனக்கு ஒரு பேசிக் கன்ஃபர்மேஷன். Now this was the procedure that was being carried out by auditors across India before the Satyam scam. But once Satyam scam happened, there was a significant change in these procedures. They started involving the banks itself. The auditor will mail the bank and ask them to give a balance confirmation for all the accounts that are held by this organization. And the bank will report saying, yes, these accounts are there, this is the balance lying with us. So then you can reconcile, saying, okay, whether the report given by bank and the books in the balances coming in the financial statements, are they matching or not? That will give you a better confirmation, not just the regular audit of the statement. In addition to the audit of the statement, if the organization, the bank itself, is giving you a letter saying that this is the actual balance held by us, then it becomes a double strength to that particular number that is coming in the financial statements. So what happened in the Satyam scam abdina, they were forging the fixed deposit documents itself. The Satyam people, what they were doing is, they used to create forged the fixed deposit documents. The fixed deposits on the, generally what people will think whenever you're seeing any fixed deposit receipt, okay, இது வந்து பார்த்தா ஒரிஜினலா மாதிரி தான் இருக்கு, மேபி there is an actual fixed deposit அப்படின்னு நினைப்பாங்க. And that is natural. But during the scam, only when the scam started unfolding, only when then they realized that this balance is not there with the bank at all. Only when they asked the bank to actually confirm what is the balances with them, they realized that most of the fixed deposits itself were a scam. Fixed deposit receipts were being fakely created by the Satyam people. Just imagine how significant this is. We are talking about a significant part of the balance sheet. The bank and cash balances, this is something that is very significant, isn't it? So not just the actual balance verification or the document verification. In addition to this, if it is possible to get a secondary confirmation, that is very well and good. And this is what is the nature of audit to carry out. Let's talk about the 5% analysis. In addition to the regular analysis, okay, 20% போட்டு பார்த்தேன், 20% வந்து this much should come, வந்திருக்கா இல்லையா, okay, yes, I'm happy. So this is how you need to analyze. Overall view ஒன்னு இருக்கும், generally நம்ம ரெகுலரா ஆடிட் பண்றது ஒன்னு இருக்கும். And this is what is the nature அப்படின்னா, what kind of audit procedure to apply for that particular line item. That is nature. Second one is extent வந்து, whether I should take one sample, whether I should take a sample, or whether I should audit everything is a sample. And extent purely means the sample size. When it comes to certain things like cash and all, you cannot audit only a few notes. I will audit only the hundreds note, அது மட்டும் எனக்கு கொடுங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு சொல்ல முடியாது. Yes, you can do this when it is a bank itself. Bankla வந்து you have hundreds and thousands and crores of notes there lying there. Physical currency will be there. So அதுல வந்து you technically cannot say that you will audit only the 100 rupee notes, you will audit only the 2000 rupee notes, and the color எனக்கு பிடிச்சிருக்கு அது மட்டும் தான் நான் கவுண்ட் பண்றேன் அப்படின்னு சொல்ல முடியாதுல்ல. You need to actually sit and do this whole reconciliation from top to bottom. And this is actually carried out by auditors on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, they will do physical count and they will tell that this is the actual cash balance. Appadiye a room full of cash irukum. It is a room full of cash. You just go and it'll be like crores and crores of rupees just lying on the floor like that. In those situations, you cannot do a sample check because that is practically not correct. That is what is the asset of the organization. For a bank, that is what is the actual basis. So in those cases, you cannot take a sample size at all. But when it comes to petty cash expenses, okay, I will check these expenses. Random petty cash expenses. Okay. These are fine. Overall ledger பார்த்தா okay, this seems to be fine அப்படின்னு ஒரு generalized conclusion arrive பண்ணலாம். Okay, but say something document வந்து சரியா இல்ல, ஒரு டாக்குமெண்ட்ல வந்து சைன் இல்ல அப்படின்னா now you need to decide, okay, இந்த மாதிரி எக்ஸ்பென்சஸ்க்கு வந்து எதுவுமே சைன் இல்லாம வந்துட்டு இருக்கு, whether this is a genuine expense, whether this expense needs to be pursued அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு அனலைஸ் பண்ணும். There are many instances where we have seen there are certain types of expenses அதுக்கு வந்து signature இருக்காது. Just the accountant will try to push it inside. ஒரு மேனேஜர் கேட்டாங்க, அவங்க சாப்பிட்டாங்க பட் புஷ் பண்ண சொன்னாங்க, அதனால நான் இதுல இன்க்ளூட் பண்ணிட்டேன் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு இந்த மாதிரி they will do certain things. So these things we need to check based on the nature and the okay, this type of expense particularly இதுக்கு வந்து approval வர மாட்டேங்குது. So this we will try to do audit everything. மீதி எல்லாம் ஓகே, கன்ஃபர்மேஷன் இருக்கு, ஆல் த திங்ஸ் ஆர் லுக்கிங் குட், ஸோ தீஸ் திங்ஸ் ஆர் ஓகே அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு so you need to establish the distinction where you need to go 100%, where you need to take sample size, where you need to rely on an external confirmation. This is what is your basic thing called as extent. அந்த ஒரு வேர்டு எக்ஸ்டென்ட்க்கு பின்னாடி இவ்வளவு இருக்கு, அந்த ஒரு வேர்டு நேச்சருக்கு பின்னாடி அவ்வளவு ஆடிட் ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் இருக்கு, அந்த எக்ஸ்டென்ட்க்கு பின்னாடி எவ்வளவு சாம்பிள் சைஸ் எடுக்கணும்ன்றது தெரியும். Next comes the timing. Timing basically again what period to carry out, whether year end la pannuma, whether interim audit la pannuma, whether you need to do it on a monthly basis. Petty cash verification ipo chinna companies ella they will do once in a year at the end of the year 31st அன்னைக்கு 31st March அன்னைக்கு அவங்க ஒரு petty cash balance எடுத்து they will do one verification and say okay boss, this is the balance that we have. They will do that confirmation and say yes, this is the petty cash balance. Manager எல்லாமே sign பண்ணுவாங்க. Okay, that is what you record. Now when it comes to bigger scale organizations, they do it on a monthly basis. Monthly petty cash reconciliation நடக்கும், அதுக்கு sign off இருக்கும், எல்லாமே இருக்கும். So there you can see all the documents, whether all 12 months the thing is matching or not, all 12 months the signatures are obtained or not, ellame check பண்ணலாம். So depending upon the aspect that you are auditing, depending upon the nature of line item that you are verifying, and depending upon the scope that you are verifying, your timing also changes. Let's look at inventory. Inventory வந்து again the same thing. It could be at the year end inventory on பெரிய inventory நடக்கும், year நடுவுல நடக்கிறது வந்து it could be on a sample basis. So depends on that at what time you need to carry out that verification. As a statutory auditor, you have been hired அப்படின்னா what procedure has to be carried at what point of time. This is what the timing decided. The timing, that is where the timing is decided. So nature is basically the audit procedures, extent is basically the scope, and timing is naturally the time at which the audit procedures need to be actually carried out. So these four factors will help you establish the scope, timing, and direction. Scope under the one, what is the end outcome or what areas to be covered. Then the timing, at what point it has to be done, and the direction, what is the audit that needs to be carried out, how it needs to be carried out, what procedures needs to be carried out. இதெல்லாமே நம்ம கைட் பண்ணோம் இல்ல, This standard is talking from the perspective of a chartered accountant, a partner who is running the organization. So he is the one who is responsible for telling people below him that these are the things that you are trying to establish. So basically, what you're trying to do is put yourself in the shoes of a chartered accountant and see how to run an organization, how to carry out an audit. So this is what you're trying to learn from all these standards on auditing. So this direction of audit is basically put yourself in their shoes and guide people as to how this audit has to be exactly conducted. Now this is what is the planning. Now these are the planning things. Let's go to the where is that PDF? Yeah. Okay. Now let me share the PDF. Okay, I hope you guys have taken this part. Let's hope in the planning areas when the please take it down, because when you are talking about section number 6 of the PDF, overall audit strategy and the audit plan, அந்த audit strategy and plan அன்றது வந்து இப்படிதான் வரும். ஸோ அதுக்கு தான் நான் இந்த ஃப்ளோ சார்ட் போட்டு வச்சிருக்கேன். So try to take this notes, and please have a running notes have a running notes along with what I'm discussing in audit. It's not practical for me to give everything at once. You need to have that constantly noted down at the parallel level. You need to take those notes. You need to analyze those notes parallelly. So here we have this planning has two things. One is audit strategy, audit plan. That is the heading that you're looking at for section number 6 in the chapter. Also overall audit strategy and the audit plan. Overall audit strategy la enna solranga, we need to establish three things in an overall audit strategy. One is scope of the audit, next is timing of the audit, and third is direction of the audit. For these things, what are the factors that will help you? Abdina, these are the factors. One is engagement characteristics. The other is reporting objectives. யாருக்கு report பண்ணோம், என்ன report பண்ணோம். And then the significant factors to direct engagement team. அவங்களுக்கு வந்து how to train them, what are the things that you need to ensure they possess, what practical experiences they need to have, where do they need to have, how much audit procedures to be carried out. All these needs to be guided by the partner or the chartered accountant who is heading this audit, the engagement partner அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. And the engagement partner needs to guide people under him. That is what is the direction. And with respect to the last thing, which is nature, timing and extent. Nature அப்படின்னா என்ன audit procedure, whether it is the regular document verification, secondary confirmation எடுக்கணுமா, இல்ல analytical procedures பண்ணணுமா, இதெல்லாமே வந்து nature. Extent is basically the scope. To what extent I need to go, whether I should take up operations, whether I should take up financial statements, whether I should take up only the balance sheet. All these things, when you do the verification, it will tell you to which extent you need to go in here. And then finally the timing, இது எப்ப பண்ணணும், during the year, quarterly, monthly, year end, what is the right time for this audit procedure. So these things will help you establish, these four factors will help you establish the scope, timing and direction of the audit. That is with respect to the overall audit strategy. And then second is the actual audit plan. Actual audit plan ku vandu there are three things. One is do the audit as per SA 315, identify and analyze the risks that are there. And then come to SA 330 where you do, once you have identified the risks that are applicable to that organization, you actually carry out some audit procedures which will help you mitigate those risks. You actually carry out those processes which will help you challenge or tackle those risks. அந்த ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் எல்லாமே பண்ணதுக்கு அப்புறமா you will have one confirmation, or you will at least have one satisfaction that these things that you have done throughout the audit are yes, okay, good அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு. In spite of that, you might have to sometimes do some additional checks and verifications. That is what is any other audit procedures. So this is the actual audit plan. Please make a note of this. That is what is section number 6. So there will be a lot of examples that will be coming throughout the class. Everywhere there will be a lot of explanation which I cannot practically write or document every single time. So this is something that you need to take as live notes. And for something like audit, it is very practically very important. Audit, law, எல்லாத்துக்குமே the running notes is very important. So you have your own notes along with the regular notes that is being given. அது இல்லைன்னா உங்களுக்கு இது புரியறதுக்கு டைம் எடுக்கும் when you're trying to study or revise it. Just to check, I'm audible, right? Everyone is able to hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, why people are leaving suddenly? Oh, okay, everyone is there. Okay, so subsequent to this, let's look at the next heading, which is changes to planning decisions during the course of the audit. So during the audit, it may be practically possible that you may come across something that you were not aware earlier. You may come across activities or events or any reports or anything that you were not aware earlier, or case நடந்துட்டு. So while the engagement letter was signed, you were not aware of this, but at the time of doing the audit, or after the audit but before the issuing the report, or after issuing the report, you have come to know about the outcome of a significant ruling that was in favor of the company or against the company அப்படின்னு ஒரு வச்சுக்கோங்க, ஒரு கேஸ் இருக்கு அப்படின்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. So this could practically change some things in the audit report, or this could practically change some of the ways in which you need to carry out the audit verification. அதனால they say, if there is anything that comes to the notice of the auditor during the audit or before the audit, then you may need to revise three things. One is audit strategy, one is audit plan, and then the third thing is the nature, timing, and extent of those audit procedures. So please make a note. Whenever anything comes to the notification of the auditor, then anything significant comes to the notification of the auditor, then what they need to do is they need to change their procedures and policies in such a way that they include that change as well. Let's say initially at the time of signing the engagement, there was some subsidiary, but before you could start the audit, they sold off the subsidiary. Now you don't have to audit the subsidiary. You just have to audit the sale proceeds of that sale proceed transaction. So the way in which you carry out the audit changes based on what has happened. Some legal case was there, some sale was there, some significant purchase was there, some significant law change. ஹிமாலயால வந்து ஆயுர்வேதிக் ப்ராடக்ட்ஸ் அந்த பிளான்ஸ் ப்ரொடெக்ட் பண்றதுக்கு வந்து suddenly sometimes government imposes a ban and says these particular ayurvedic plants cannot be uh, done, any agricultural or scientific thing cannot be done on these products for so many years அப்படின்னு சடனா ஒரு இது போட்டுருவாங்க. அந்த மாதிரி இன்ஸ்டன்சஸ்ல என்ன ஆயிடும்னா it will affect the revenue model of the organization. So now going concern will come into the picture. Is this organization in a position to continue with their going concern structure or not? Is it possible for them to continue with their current setup or not? இந்த மாதிரி confusions எல்லாம் வரும். So for this, based on what is the information that you are receiving, either uh, before the audit, during the audit, or after the audit. That is why they say audit planning is a continuous process and not a discrete one. As and when there is a change, you also need to adapt to it immediately. So if there is a requirement for change, there are three things where the change is expected. One is naturally the audit strategy and then the audit plan. And when you change these two, naturally the actual audit that you are carrying out, the nature, timing, and extent of further audit procedures will also be required to be modified. These are the three areas where you need to focus. This documentation is something that we will look at separately. Let's look at the direction, supervision, and review. Earlier, I have used the word direction. On the direction, these three things you need to consider: the size and complexity of the entity, the area that you are auditing, and the risks of material misstatement that you are going to look at. Risks of material misstatement, I have already told you. Every single line item that is forming part of the financials, எல்லாத்துக்கும் ஒரு risk உண்டு. அந்த risk வந்து it depends upon the company, it depends upon the nature of the organization, it depends upon the industry. The same thing when it comes to Ola, you will not find any asset. When it comes to Ola, Uber, and all, you will not find significant assets on the balance sheet. But when you go to a manufacturing sector, you will find significant amount of assets on the balance sheet. So depending upon the organization, you need to constantly modify what is the material misstatement that is applicable for that particular organization. What is material? I have discussed with you. What is misstatement? There is a separate standard for that. We will read about it in that chapter or standard. So, based on these things, the size and complexity of the entity, the area of the audit, and the risks that you are going to face in that particular audit or line items, the chartered accountant will guide his team as to what is exactly the audit should be done, what are the areas or what are the laws and regulations that you have to learn, what training is required to be given. இதெல்லாமே வந்து forms part of the direction for the auditor. அதுக்கப்புறமா சூப்பர்விஷன் அண்ட் ரிவ்யூன்றது வந்து ஆக்சுவலி ஆடிட் பண்ணும்போது சூப்பர்வைஸ் பண்ணுவாங்க. ஆடிட் பண்ணதுக்கு அப்புறமா அவங்க ரிவ்யூ பண்ணுவாங்க. அதான் டைரக்ஷன், சூப்பர்விஷன் அண்ட் ரிவ்யூ. Okay, so with this we are technically done with SA 300. We can, if you want, I'll give you 5-10 minutes just to revisit SA 300, whatever we have discussed till now. Try to go through it and see if you have any questions or queries, just raise it, or otherwise we will go forward to the next one. Okay, so let's start with the next chapter or next standard, that is SA 230, which is audit documentation. 300 start panna, it is not necessary that you need to continue in that order. So whichever order I'm teaching or Usha madam is taking, we are all taking in a specific format. We are taking in a specific order. So even when you are trying to revise, try to go through 200, 210, 220 together, then come to 300 series, start with 300, then go to 230, and then come back to 315, 320, 330, and then you can go like that. Whatever format I am taking and Usha madam is taking, there is a fixed order to that. So take or read that in the same order that we are trying to teach you, so that there is a continuity. Now let us start with essay 230, which is audit documentation. When they use the word audit documentation, what exactly are they referring to? Under this standard talks about what exactly constitutes audit documentation, what can be considered as audit documentation. Here in this particular standard, in the previous standard, I was telling you there are certain keywords like audit strategy, audit plan, scope, timing, and directions of audit, nature, timing, and extension of audit. இது வந்து these are the keywords for that chapter or for that standard. When it comes to this particular standard, the very first keyword is sufficient and appropriate. This is a keyword. When what is expected from an audit evidence அப்படின்னா audit documentation அப்படின்னா first thing is it should be sufficient and appropriate. These are the two characteristics that you need to check for whenever you are getting any documentation. What is sufficient, what is appropriate andradhu vandu there is a specific definition that is given. Let us see if they have described it here. They have not described it here, I think. Okay, just a minute. I will take up. So this is what they are talking about when it comes to sufficiency and appropriateness. This is a keyword that needs to be remembered when it comes to this standard. So whenever you're collecting something called as an audit documentation, what exactly is audit documentation? Abdina, it could be anything that you are getting before the audit, during the audit, and after the audit. Everything becomes audit documentation. What is before the audit? Audit strategy, audit plan, idellame vandu before the audit. They also become your audit documentation because for this particular audit, you are creating some particular files for the very purpose of this audit. So they form part of the overall file that you have for this particular engagement, isn't it? So before the audit, you have something called as an audit strategy, which is a document, audit plan, which is again another document. And then during the audit, you have something called as working papers. Working papers under the one, we may not do it in a small scale organization or small scale audit firms. We don't generally do working papers. But Big Four நீங்க போனீங்கன்னா every item that you audit, you have to prepare a working paper for that. என்ன இது in the working paper அப்படின்னா what have you audited, what is the base file, what is the sample that you have taken. என்ன base file எடுத்தீங்க, அதுல அந்த sample எப்படி arrive பண்ணீங்க, what is the sample that you have taken, அந்த sampleல நீங்க என்ன audit பண்ணீங்க, அந்த sampleல what is the observation that you have identified, இது எல்லாமே you need to very detailedly document. And naturally, when it comes to companies like Big Four, they have audit software which will help you do all these things. நீங்க ஒரு ட்ரையல் பேலன்ஸ் அப்லோட் பண்ணீங்கன்னா the software itself will highlight certain line items for you to check. So that becomes the basis. என்ன டாக்குமெண்ட் ட்ரையல் பேலன்ஸ் நீங்க அப்லோட் பண்ணீங்க, அந்த ட்ரையல் பேலன்ஸ்ல சாம்பிள், வாட் இஸ் த சாம்பிள் இட் ஹாஸ் கிவன், த சிஸ்டம் ஹாஸ் கிவன், தே வில் பி ஹைலைட்டட். அது வந்து ஒரு செப்பரேட் ஷீட்ல வைக்கணும். அந்த இண்டிவிஜுவல் ஃபோல்டர்ஸ், அந்த இண்டிவிஜுவல் லெட்ஜர்ஸ் எடுத்து You need to see the system has highlighted because it has, based on some logic, it has identified that there is something which is not appropriate in this. So you need to get into that. So you will do the audit for that places. So these things are basically working papers. Now, this is something you prepare during the audit. What about the documentations given by the client? The documentations given by the client is generally what we call as the audit evidence. Avanga, this is the evidence for this accounting entry அப்படின்னு ஒரு லெட்டர் காமிப்பாங்க, இல்லைன்னா ஒரு போர்ட் ரெசல்யூஷன் காமிப்பாங்க, ஒரு இன்வாய்ஸ் காமிப்பாங்க, ஒரு ரிப்போர்ட் காமிப்பாங்க. Whatever the client is giving you, it could be a written confirmation, written representations. There is one particular standard for that. Written representations அப்படின்னா how they have chosen the accounting policies, how they have established this provision amount. In the Mariella, certain areas, the auditor will ask the management to particularly give a writing, a letter in writing saying that they have complied with the laws and regulations, they have complied with the accounting rules, they have complied with the taxation rules. இப்படி இந்த ப்ரொவிஷன்ஸ் வந்து இந்த மாதிரி பேசிஸ்ல அரைவ் பண்ணும். There are certain line items which will be specifically described. So this, the owners of the company will specifically give a letter and sign stating that this is what we have done. அது வந்து ரிட்டன் ரெப்ரசன்டேஷன் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. ஸோ இட் குட் பி அ ரிட்டன் ரெப்ரசன்டேஷன், இட் குட் பி அ டாக்ஸ் ரிப்போர்ட், it could be an internal audit report, it could be a actuaries report, it could be a legal report, it could be a tax invoice, it could be a sale invoice, it could be a purchase invoice, it could be a credit note. Anything that is given by the entity during the course of the audit to you, that becomes your audit evidence. Okay, what you prepare for yourself, that is your working paper. What is prepared by your audit firm, the audit strategy, the audit plan, இது எல்லாமே சேர்ந்து finally the audit report, everything together is called as audit documentation. Now when you're talking about audit documentation, there are two particular words that they say specifically when you are doing it for audit strategy, plan and working papers. This is something from your side, so that's not much of a problem because you will take your own quality standards are there, you will take your care, you will ensure that there are things are going well, everything that is from your end. But what about the documents that you are receiving from them? How do you place a reliance on them? So you are asking the daddy, ICA, sir, எனக்கு சொல்லுங்க how to place reliance on the documents that they are giving. So daddy is telling you there are two qualities each document must have. One is sufficiency, one is appropriateness. So if these two qualities are matched, then you can consider that audit evidence as the when that document as an audit evidence. Let's go through those points. First one, the auditor shall design and perform audit procedures that are appropriate in circumstances and for the purpose of obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Yes, நம்ம பண்ற audit வந்து it should be in such a manner that there should be audit evidence against everything that we are auditing. That is the first point. Second, audit evidence is necessary to support the auditor's opinion and the report. Audit evidence வந்து most of us we do this mistake of taking the documents and leaving it அங்க கிளைண்ட் பிளேஸ்ல விட்டுட்டு வந்துருவோம், இல்லைன்னா வந்ததுக்கு அப்புறமா ஃபைல் பண்ண மாட்டோம், இல்லைன்னா those papers we keep it at home and we lose them. This is something that is practically happening with most of you guys, most of us, everyone. This happens, but technically speaking that is what is the basis for the entire audit. If anything goes wrong in the future, நீங்க இருக்க மாட்டீங்க, நான் இருக்க மாட்டேன். 3 வருஷத்துக்கு அப்புறமா most of us don't stay with the organization, isn't it? So in this case, if anything comes back to the organization after 3 years, what document they will have to prove? They need to have something to say that this is what we have audited, right? So this actually saved many chartered accountancy firms from legal troubles. This audit documentation is very, very important because you need to prove yourself that this is the document I have taken, this is the sample that I have verified, that is the reason I have not come across that fraud, or that is the reason I was not in a position to report anything அப்படின்னு நீங்க ப்ரூவ் பண்ண வேண்டியது வந்து, the only thing that will help you is the audit evidence. You need to keep that audit evidence for many years. அதனால try not to lose the papers that you are getting from the client. Don't leave it here and there. Try to at least leave it in the office. If not, you're filing also, that is also fine. Still, just leave it in the office. When you leave it in the office, at least, okay, after some years also, if they want, they will at least search those papers. இது எங்கேயாவது கிடைச்சிருக்கு அப்படின்னா at least something they can do out of it. Okay. And for to give some basic examples, there is one very big case study. ஒரு கேஸ் ஸ்டடி என்ன அப்படின்னா, there was an auditor which was sued and by the statute the investors, and they said auditor did not do the audit properly. அவங்க வந்து they have taken the money and they have not done the proper work. When auditor went for auditing, the client was giving a duplicate set of books of accounts. The client was giving a duplicate accounting books for the auditor to audit. But their original books had all the black money, all the wrong stuff, all the wrong black holes, everything was there. But the accountant was parallelly maintaining another set of books of accounts which had all the beautified part. Only the properly maintained things. For everything they will create one documentation and they will create one duplicate set of books of accounts. So இதுக்கு வந்து they filed a case, and the auditor said, sir, this is what is submitted to us. We have the proof, we have the email proof, we have the communication, this is what was received by us. So based on this, if you look at it, take any professional, if you look at this document, do you get a doubt that this document, the TB that you received or the data that is received, will you get a doubt that this is not correct? Absolutely not. No one, even the court side also, they could not prove that this when you look at it or when you audit it, you will not even know that it is a duplicate books of accounts. So based on this, they said, sir, we are not in a position to establish that this is a duplicate books of accounts. So how do you expect us to be part of the fraud? So then the court ruled that case in favor of the auditors and said, yes, the auditor is not in a position to prove that. So he cannot be filed anything legally, anything cannot be done against the auditor. They gave the ruling. So this was possible only because the auditor had those backup documents. அவங்களுக்கு வந்து இமெயில் இது எல்லாமே வந்து இருந்துச்சு. அதனால they could do this win this legal case. Otherwise, just imagine what troubles the auditors must have to go through, isn't it? So in the audit evidence under there are many instances like that. Now another instance that I can think of, if this is the sample size, just imagine, because of the sample size that you have taken, you might have missed a fraud, and this is very much possible. And this happened in many of the instances where they say the auditor has clearly given some reports with respect to this particular area. அவங்க பேங்க் பார்த்திருக்கேன் அப்படின்னு சொன்னாங்க, பட் பேங்க்ல தான் clearly there is some unreconciled line items, why have they not audited அப்படின்னு சொன்னா, you can show the working papers and say, sir, see this working paper, this is dated so and so date, this is signed by so and so manager, this was the actual working paper done during that audit time. During that time, we have not come across anything that helped us identify a different sample. That unreconciled line item was not there at that point of time, or at that point of time the sample size that we have taken in the inventory was this one. So in this inventory we have not come across any fraud, so we thought everything is okay. So அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு they showed the working evidence, the working papers காமிச்சா, Then the court said, okay, fine, this was the document, this was the sample size. Naturally, in the sample la vanda fraud nadakala, adanala they couldn't establish that there was a fraud. So auditor oda tappilla idla appdin solittu they gave the ruling. So this is what is helpful, not just for the legal case, for to prove that auditor has given a true and fair view on the financial statements andradhukku வந்து prove பண்றதுக்கு the only thing is the audit evidence. So on the audit evidence there are two things that they say. One is sufficiency, one is appropriateness. How much of evidence is, what is the sufficiency? How much of evidence do you need? Is it the tax invoice you need? Is it a supplier statement you need? Is it a external report that you need? Is it a confirmation that you need? Is it a written representation that you need? What kind of documentation will satisfy your requirement? That is what is sufficiency. The another one is appropriateness. I'm looking at cash balance. Okay, cash balance la vande what is the appropriate audit evidence? One, எனக்கு petty cash reconciliation physical verification ஒரு document, அது எனக்கு appropriate for this purpose. எனக்கு for what is that, ஒரு petty cash reconciliation statement பண்ணா that is appropriate for me. ஒரு petty cash summary file போட்டு that is being approved by the GM or the CEO, that is appropriate for me. For me, all the bills that are there, it is actual cash bills, and in the sometimes we don't have invoices இல்லையா, இன்வாய்ஸ் இல்லாத இடத்துல ஒரு சின்ன piece of paperல எழுதி போட்டுருவோம். That is not appropriate. That is where you need to step in and say, yes boss, this is not appropriate for me, this evidence I cannot consider. But let's say there is a proper tax invoice, there is a proper documentation there, okay, then you can say yes, this evidence I can accept. So sufficiency and appropriateness, there are two things. One is sufficiency, whether the document that is given is required for this purpose or not, whether the document or how much documentation you want, how much of reports you want, how much of legal how much of expert level report you want, what kind of report you want, anything that is talking about the type of document is the sufficiency. And the appropriateness is whether for that point that you are auditing, உங்களுக்கு வந்த audit evidence, is it really applicable or not? That is what is the appropriateness. These are the two factors for any audit evidence. These are the two factors to be considered. So let us stop the class today at this point. From tomorrow we will take up from here. And this is a keyword for this chapter. If any question comes on SA 230, the first thing that you need to think of is sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. This thing should run in your mind. Okay, so let's stop for the day. Thank you everyone, have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.